He had a folder. A plain manila folder. The kind you buy in a 10-pack at Staples for $6, and he was holding it against his chest, like it might blow away in the wind, coming off Lake Ontario. I stood on the porch in my slippers because I hadn't expected anyone, least of all him, and the November cold was biting through the thin cotton of my housecoat. 7 years. 7 years, and he shows up on a Tuesday morning, with a folder and a face I barely recognized. "Hannah," my older brother said. "Can I come in?" I didn't answer right away. Behind me, inside the small bungalow I'd scraped together a down payment for in Kingston, my daughter was watching the same episode of Paw Patrol she watched every morning before daycare. The sound of it floated out through the screen door, cheerful and tinny, and it suddenly felt obscene that he was here, on my porch, with that folder, while my daughter hummed along to a cartoon about rescue dogs. "Hannah, please, I just need an hour." I stepped back and held the door open without saying a word. He came in the way he used to come into our parents' house at Christmas, shoes off at the mat, coat hung on the hook, all polite and rehearsed. He looked older than I expected. His hair had gone almost entirely gray at the temples, and he was thinner than I remembered, the kind of thin that happens to men in their 40s when the stress finally catches up with them. I led him to the kitchen and put the kettle on, not because I wanted to be hospitable, but because I needed something to do with my hands. Let me tell you how we got here. My husband died on a Thursday, in March of 2018. His name was Daniel, and he was a paramedic for Frontenac Paramedic Services, and he was driving home from a night shift on Highway 401 just outside of Napanee when a transport truck crossed the median. The OPP officer who came to our apartment at 6:14 inches the morning had her hair in a tight bun and a small tea stain on her collar, and I remember thinking, absurdly, that someone should tell her about the stain before she had to deliver more bad news to anyone else. I was 32 weeks pregnant. I remember that too. I remember because, when she said the words, my hand went to my belly, and the baby kicked. Hard, like she already knew. The labor started that afternoon. The doctors at Kingston General tried everything to stop it. They used magnesium sulfate and steroids for the baby's lungs, and for a while it looked like they'd hold her in. But my body had decided, or grief had decided, and on the Friday morning, 36 hours after a constable I'd never met, told me my husband's chest had been crushed on a highway I drive every week. I delivered a daughter who weighed 3 pounds and 2 ounces. I named her Ellie. It was the name Daniel and I had agreed on over pancakes at Cora's 3 weeks earlier, and I wasn't about to let a highway take that from me too. Ellie went into the NICU. She was what they call a late preterm with complications, which is a polite Canadian way of saying her lungs weren't ready. Her heart had a small hole that the cardiologist wanted to monitor, and her weight kept dropping instead of climbing. She needed a CPAP machine, then a feeding tube, then a round of antibiotics for an infection she picked up in her 2nd week. She was in that NICU for 41 days. Now, I know what people watching this are thinking. You're thinking, this is Canada, the hospital doesn't charge you. And you'd be mostly right. Ellie's medical care was covered by OHIP. The ambulance ride wasn't, and the prescriptions we needed when we went home weren't. But the big scary numbers you see in American stories, I didn't have those. What I had was different. I had a mortgage on an apartment in a building Daniel and I had bought together 18 months earlier. I had a car loan on a Honda CR-V that Daniel had insisted we buy when we found out I was pregnant, because he wanted our baby to ride in something new and safe. I had 2 months of maternity leave that I wasn't supposed to start for another 6 weeks, and I had a husband whose life insurance was through his workplace, which meant the payout existed, but was tangled in paperwork that could take up to 90 days to clear. The funeral home wanted $11,000. The cemetery wanted another $6,000. The mortgage was $2,100 a month. The car payment was $470. And I had a baby in the NICU who I could only hold once every 6 hours for 20 minutes at a time, and I wasn't sleeping, and I wasn't eating, and my bank account was draining so fast I could almost hear it. I did the math at 3 a.m. on the 10th day, sitting in the pull-out chair beside Ellie's isolette, and I needed $17,000 to bridge the gap until the insurance came through. 17,000. To keep the roof over our heads and bury my husband properly and not lose the car that Daniel had bought for our baby. I called my mother. My mother and father live in a 4-bedroom house in Oakville that they bought in 1989 for a price that now sounds like a joke. My father retired at 60 from his position as a VP at a mid-sized logistics company with a pension that pays him almost as much as he used to earn. My mother does not work and has not worked since 1988. They have 2 RRSPs, a TFSA each, a non-registered investment account, and the house itself, which is worth close to $2 million now, mortgage-free. I am telling you this because I want you to understand what I was asking for and who I was asking. Mum, it's me. Can you talk? Hannah, darling, I've got 6 minutes. We're at the gate. What is it? The gate? Pearson, we're flying to Lisbon tonight, remember? I told you at Christmas. I had forgotten. Or more accurately, I had heard her say it in December and assumed it was one of those things they talked about but never did. They talked about trips all the time. Morocco, Iceland, a river cruise on the Danube. Most of them never happened. But apparently Lisbon was happening, and apparently it was happening now, 17 days after her son-in-law had been crushed to death on the 401 and 10 days after she'd held her granddaughter through the window of a NICU isolette because the nurse said she was too congested to scrub. Mum, I need help. I need to borrow some money. There was a pause. I heard an airport announcement in the background, the kind that says please do not leave your baggage unattended. How much, darling? 17,000. It's to bridge until Daniel's insurance comes through. I can sign a promissory note. I can pay you interest. I can't lose the apartment, Mum. Not right now. Another pause. Longer this time. I could almost hear her calculating, but not what I thought she was calculating. I thought she was calculating whether she had it. Of course she had it. They could write a check for 10 times that, and not notice. No. She was calculating something else. Hannah, your father and I have been planning this trip for 11 months. The flights are non-refundable. The hotel in Sintra is non-refundable. We've already paid for the tour in Porto. I'm looking at close to $9,000 in deposits, darling, and if we cancel now we lose all of it. Mum, I'm not asking you to cancel the trip. I'm asking you to transfer money. You can do it from the lounge. You can do it on your phone right now. It's not that simple, sweetheart. 17,000 is a lot of money to move around while we're traveling. Your father likes to keep an eye on things, and he won't want to be dealing with bank calls from Portugal. Can it wait 3 weeks? We'll be back on the 28th. I remember looking up at the ceiling of the NICU family room. There was a water stain shaped like Newfoundland in one of the tiles. I'd been staring at it for 10 days. I remember my mouth going dry, and I remember thinking, she doesn't understand what I'm saying. She thinks this is a billing issue. She thinks I'm asking about a phone plan. Mum. Daniel is dead. Ellie is in an incubator. I'm going to lose the apartment if I don't come up with this money in the next 10 days. I cannot wait 3 weeks. Darling, don't be dramatic. The bank isn't going to foreclose on you in 10 days. You call them. You explain. They'll give you a hardship deferral. They do it all the time. The bank already said no. I called Monday. Then call a different bank. I didn't say anything for a long time. I could hear her breathing. I could hear my father in the background asking her something about the gate number. I could hear a child laughing somewhere. Mom, is Dad there? Can I talk to him? Your father is getting us coffees, Hannah. Look, we'll talk when we get back. Have you called Daniel's parents? They've got that cottage in Muskoka. They must be sitting on some money too. It makes more sense for them to help, doesn't it? She's their granddaughter as much as she's ours. Daniel's parents lived on his father's pension from Canada Post, and his mother's part-time hours at a bakery in Huntsville. The cottage she was talking about was a fishing shack on a half-acre lot that had been in his father's family since the 60s. They'd already driven down twice. His mother had been at the hospital the morning Ellie was born. His father had sat with me in the funeral home and picked out the urn because I couldn't make myself look at the catalog. They had given me every dollar they could, and I knew, because I'd seen the check, that every dollar was 1,200 of them, and I knew what it cost them to write it. Mum, I have called them. They helped. I still need 17,000. Well, I don't know what to tell you, Hannah. We can talk about it when we're back. I have to go, they're calling our group. She hung up. I sat in that family room and I did not cry, because I had run out of tears somewhere around day 6, and what I felt instead was a kind of cold that started at the top of my head and moved down. I tried my father's cell. It went to voicemail. I sent a text to both of them, the kind of text you shouldn't have to send, the kind that says, "I'm begging you, please." My brother called me back instead. My brother is 6 years older than me. His name is Marcus, and at the time he was 38, and he was a regional manager for a chain of car dealerships based out of Mississauga. He was married to a woman named Jillian who worked in pharmaceutical sales, and they had 2 boys, 7 and 5, and a house in Burlington with a pool. I loved him, once. I idolized him when I was little. He taught me to ride a bike on the cul-de-sac in Oakville, and he let me tag along to his hockey games. And he wrote me a recommendation letter for my first job. I want you to understand that too, because what he said on that phone call is something I've replayed for 7 years, and I still can't quite believe it came out of his mouth. Hannah, Mum just called me from the lounge. She's upset. What's going on? Marcus, I need help. I need 17,000 to bridge until the insurance. Yeah, she told me. Listen, I get it, okay? I get that it's been a bad month. But you can't put this on Mum and Dad right before their trip. They've been looking forward to this for a year. Dad's been dealing with his back all winter. Mum's been taking care of him. They need this. Marcus, Daniel is dead. I know, Han. I know. And I'm sorry. I was at the funeral, remember? I was there. But you can't just dump a financial emergency on them the day they're flying out. It's not fair. You've had 2 weeks to plan this. Why are you calling now? I genuinely could not breathe for a moment. I looked through the glass at Ellie. There was a little blue knit hat on her head, that a volunteer had made. Her chest was moving up and down in the tiny, rapid way that preemies breathe, like a bird. Marcus. I didn't plan the insurance delay. Great West set up to 90 days. I've been making calls since the day after the funeral. I'm trying. I'm just asking for a bridge. Then ask Daniel's parents. They don't have it. Well, neither do Mum and Dad, apparently. So maybe you need to look into some options. There are programs for this. Call Service Canada. Apply for EI. Get the Canada Child Benefit fast-tracked. Don't ruin their trip, Han. That's all I'm saying. They deserve it. They've worked their whole lives. Call your in-laws again. Marcus. Are you hearing yourself? I'm hearing someone who's stressed and isn't thinking straight. Look, when they get back on the 28th, we'll all sit down, okay? We'll figure something out. Maybe I can put something in. But you gotta stop with the panic calls. Jillian said Mum was practically in tears in the lounge. Jillian knows? Jillian's the one who told me to call you. She's worried about you, Hannah. We all are. But you've got to handle this. I didn't answer him. I hung up. I stared at the phone until the screen went black, and then I stared at my own reflection in the black screen, and I did not recognize the woman looking back. I didn't call them again. I didn't text. I didn't send a Facebook message. 3 days later, I put the CRV up for sale on AutoTrader and sold it to a guy from Brockville for $18,000 cash on a Saturday afternoon. I paid off the loan, kept the difference, and took a cab home from the dealership with Ellie's empty car seat in my lap because I couldn't bring myself to leave it behind. I called Daniel's best friend from the paramedic service, a guy named Rob, and he drove me to the NICU for the next 3 weeks in his own truck, without asking for a dime of gas money. I set up a GoFundMe that I hated every second of, and Daniel's colleagues raised $11,000 in 9 days. The insurance came through on day 72, instead of day 90. I kept the apartment. I buried my husband. I brought my daughter home on the 42nd day. And I blocked every single member of my family, on every single channel, before the plane from Lisbon even landed. My mother called, when they got back. My father called once. Marcus called 4 times in the first week, then twice in the second, then once, then not again for almost 2 years. They sent a Christmas card that December with a photo of the grandkids, Marcus and Jillian's boys, in matching reindeer sweaters, and a handwritten note from my mother that said, "We miss you, darling. Please come home for the holidays." I threw it in the recycling without reading the rest. My mother-in-law came over that Christmas Eve and helped me put together a second-hand crib for Ellie, and she cried when we got it assembled, and I cried too, and the two of us ate leftover tortilla on the kitchen floor and watched Ellie sleep. I moved to Kingston 18 months later. I took a job as a registered practical nurse at Providence Care. I bought a small bungalow with my insurance money and my mother-in-law's help. I put Ellie in a good daycare. I started dating a man named Trevor 2 years ago, a widower with a quiet voice, and he has been nothing but kind to us. And that is how I got to the morning with the manila folder. Marcus sat at my kitchen table and declined the tea. He sat there with his hands folded on top of the folder, and he looked at the stainless steel kettle instead of me. "Dad died last month," he said. I didn't say anything. In his sleep. It was quick. "Mums, she's not doing well. She's in a retirement residence in Burlington now. She can't be alone." Still, I said nothing. The funeral was on the 16th. Mum wanted me to reach out before, but we couldn't find your address. You changed your number. You're not on Facebook. I had to hire a guy to find this house, Hannah. Do you understand what that felt like? Having to pay a guy to find my own sister? I understand what it felt like to need $17,000 to bury my husband, I said. He closed his eyes. He opened them. He slid the folder across the table. "Dad's estate. There's a will. I'm the executor. I wanted to bring you the documents in person." I did not open the folder. I looked at it, and I looked at him, and I said, "What's in it for you, Marcus?" "Excuse me? You didn't drive 6 hours from Burlington to Kingston on a Tuesday morning to hand-deliver paperwork you could have couriered. What's in it for you?" He did the thing he used to do when we were kids, and I caught him in a lie, this small tightening around his mouth. He looked away, then back. Dad left the estate split 3 ways. A third to Mum for her care, a third to me, and a third to you. Okay. It's a lot, Han. The house sold for 1.94. The investments are about 1.6 between the RRSPs and the non-registered, minus taxes and Mum's portion. You're looking at just over 400,000. I waited. There's a condition in the will though. Dad added it in 2022. It says the inheritance to you is conditional on what he called family reconciliation. It says you have to sign an acknowledgement that you cut off the family unjustly, and you have to agree to monthly visits with Mum at her residence, and there's a clause about, attending family gatherings. Let me see the will. He hesitated. For a fraction of a second. But I saw it. Marcus, let me see the will. He opened the folder. He slid a stapled document across the table. I flipped to the relevant clause, which he had helpfully tabbed with a yellow post-it. I read it twice. And then I read the paragraph above it, and the paragraph below it, and I turned back to the first page, and I noticed the date. This will was drafted 3 weeks ago, Marcus. Not 2022. 3 weeks ago. 2 weeks after Dad died. He didn't answer. There is no way Dad signed a will 2 weeks after he died. So either this is a fraudulent document, or this is a codicil you and Mum drafted, or this is something else entirely. Which is it? It's a revised will. Dad had talked about making these changes for a long time. Mum and I finalized them after, to honor his wishes. His wishes. He wanted the family back together, Hannah. You broke his heart. You know that? I looked at my brother. I looked at this man I had loved since I was old enough to love anyone. This man who had taught me to ride a bike, and I felt something I hadn't felt in 7 years. I felt sad for him. Not angry. Just sad, the way you feel sad for someone who has chosen to become small. Marcus, what does the actual will say? The one Dad actually signed. He was quiet for a long time. It splits everything 3 ways. No conditions. So you came here to trick me into signing something that says I'll take less, or nothing, unless I perform family reconciliation for you. Mum needs the money, Hannah. The residence is $8,000 a month. She needs. A third of $3.5 million is well over $1 million, Marcus. She doesn't need my third too. You do. His silence was answer enough. I stood up. I walked to the counter. I poured myself the tea I'd made for him, and I added milk from the fridge, and I leaned against the counter and looked at my brother, and I said, "Get out of my house. Hannah, you drove 6 hours to try to steal from my daughter. Ellie is 7 years old, Marcus. She's never met you. She's never met any of you. And you drove 6 hours to try to con her mother out of her grandfather's estate, so she can continue to never meet you. Get out of my house. Hannah, listen. If you are not out of this house in 30 seconds, I am going to call the police and report an attempted fraud. I am going to bring every document you just showed me, and I am going to make sure the Law Society of Ontario knows which lawyer helped you draft that fake codicil, because someone helped you, Marcus. You didn't do this alone. 30 seconds. He got up. He took the folder. He left the will. At the door, he turned. Do you have any idea what I've been dealing with? Dad was sick for 2 years. Mum fell down the stairs in November. I've been carrying all of it. And you've been off playing nurse in Kingston, like none of us exist. Where were you? I held the door open. I was where you told me to be, Marcus. On my own. Call my in-laws, remember? That's what you said. So I did. I closed the door. I locked it. I walked back to the kitchen and I picked up the will, the real will, the one he'd accidentally left behind along with the fraudulent codicil. I sat down at my kitchen table and I read it front to back. And I was crying by the time I got to the last page, because my father, my quiet, distant, retired VP father, had left me a handwritten note attached to the will. It was dated November 2023, a year and a half ago. It said, "Hannah, I know. I have known for a long time. Your mother and I made a mistake that cannot be made right with money. But I want you to have this in case the right words never come. I am sorry. Your father." He never said it in life. He said it in a will. And I don't know if that makes it better or worse, but I know it makes it real. I hired a lawyer in Kingston that afternoon. Her name is Priya, and she is the best $700 an hour I have ever spent. Within 3 weeks, she had uncovered the fraudulent codicil, identified the disbarred paralegal Marcus had paid to draft it, filed a complaint with the Law Society, and secured my full 1/3 share of my father's estate, $413,000, after taxes. I put $300 into a trust for Ellie. I put the rest into the mortgage. Marcus was charged with attempted fraud. The case was plead down to a peace bond, because of course it was, and because my mother begged me to drop the criminal side of it, and because, at the end of the day, I did not want my brother in prison. I wanted him out of my life. The civil outcome, the inheritance, the Law Society complaint against the paralegal, that was enough. My mother is still in the residence in Burlington. I have not visited her. I sent her a card, once, last Christmas. It said, "I hope you are comfortable." I did not sign it. Trevor asked me, a few months after all of this was done, why I hadn't just forgiven them. He asked it gently. He asked it the way a good man asks hard questions, which is to say with no pressure and a lot of room. And I thought about it for a while, and what I said was this. Forgiveness is not a thing you owe. It's a thing you give, if you want to, when you are ready, to people who have done the work of deserving it. My father did some of that work, in a handwritten note in a manila folder, and I have made peace with him in my own way. My mother and my brother have done none of it. They have only ever wanted access, not reconciliation. And I am not obligated to open the door, just because they are knocking. Ellie is 7 now. She is a kind, funny, stubborn little girl who loves horses and hates peas and can already read chapter books. She has my mother-in-law, who is her grandma, and she has Trevor's mother, who is becoming a second grandma, and she has Rob the paramedic, who is her uncle in every way that matters. She has a whole family. She just doesn't have the one I was born into. And I have come to understand that this is not a loss. This is a gift. She is growing up without the people who would have taught her that love is conditional and that tragedy is an inconvenience. She is growing up around people who show up. That is the only inheritance I care about now. And if any of you watching this are sitting in an airport lounge tonight, or on your couch in your big paid-off house, and you are getting a call from someone you love who is in the worst moment of their life, and you are thinking about the deposit you'll lose, or the trip you've been planning, or the inconvenience of the timing, I want you to hear me very clearly. You do not get to call yourself family later. Family is what you do in the moment, not what you claim at the funeral, not what you write into a fraudulent will, not what you say on a porch in November with a manila folder. You are what you do when the phone rings. That's it. That's the whole thing. And my phone, when it rings now, only rings for the people who picked up when mine did.